Well, good morning. I am glad to worship with all of you this week before school starts for so many of you. It's wonderful to celebrate a new year and a new beginning and fall, even though if it doesn't quite feel that way outside quite yet. And even if your life or your household's life doesn't center around an academic year schedule, I think for all of us, there's a kind of newness and new start this time of year. And I'm really glad for that rhythm today, and particularly glad to mark that rhythm of school and bless the beginning of school with all of you today. I listened recently to a talk that the poet David White gave to teachers at an elementary school. It was kind of like a teacher in-service talk before the year started. And White told a story about being in school himself. He's from the UK, and he described a teacher that he had, a kind of wild and unpredictable teacher who kept them guessing what was about to happen next. And White said that one time this teacher came and picked up one of his friends by his blazer lapels and lifted this boy out of his seat and held him up against the wall and said, "All these things we're reading, all of these wonderful works of literature, they are about you." I'm substituting my words for the words of the teacher here, but White said that this teacher, this energetic teacher, took these works of literature they were reading, the material from the class, and made it about, in his words, about blood, about life, about what these students were going to encounter. And after this episode, he said that they saw themselves in everything that they read. Maybe you've had a teacher like this, probably not quite like that. But someone whose passion and whose energy made the material of the class connect with your experience. In this talk that White was giving to these elementary school teachers, part of what he was doing was reminding these teachers of their call. White said that people can spend years of their life preparing for their work. And then as soon as they begin the actual work, they forget why they wanted to do it in the first place. Maybe you know something about this. So much of our journey is remembering our sense of vocation, the deep call that we heard somewhere way back when. Remembering who you are, White says, remembering how you belong in the world, remembering your own true nature. If teaching is about anything, he says, it is about asking children to remember who they are, and to remember the greater context of whatever subject you're teaching. My words now. It's about joining the little arc of our lives into the big arc that's all around us. The big arc of human experience that's all around us. It's about joining our little stories, your little story and mine, into the big story that surrounds us all the time. White, this poet that I'm quoting, he's really a fascinating person because he's worked fairly extensively with businesses, with corporations. And his work has addressed, in part, how businesses can help their employees be more imaginative. In the poetic tradition, he says, imagination is not the ability to make up new things, but instead it is the ability to form images that make sense of all the thousands of images that you're surrounded by all the time. It is the ability, he says, to create ultimate context for all our lives. To take all of the pieces, the bits and pieces that you and I experience, and to tie them all together. To tie us all to the big story that surrounds us all the time. When the Book of Common Prayer defines the mission of the church in one sentence, it says that the mission of this place, this enterprise, is to restore all people to union with God and union with each other. Union with God and union with each other. And we're going to be talking about this union, this idea of union, a lot in the year that we're kicking off right now. When your vestry did some strategic thinking and planning earlier in the year to set goals for this calendar year, we thought about the particular gifts of this parish, of this place. That's how we started our planning. By thinking about our own experiences here and using those experiences to tell us about the gifts of the place. And one of the ideas that came out loud and clear was that we value this place because we don't all agree. You can find people here who have very different ideas about God from yours. And I'm willing to bet there are people here whose ideas about politics are different from yours. We come from a wide range of the theological and political spectrum. This is a good thing. Thanks be to God. You and I are here because we're seeking something deeper than just agreement. In fact, I would say we're seeking something that we can't find if the only people we interact with are people we already agree with. You and I, we're seeking to experience, to know, a union that is deeper, where we know each other from the deepest parts of ourselves, and where in that depth, we know God. And when we get to that depth, somehow all the pieces fit together. It's the place where we can hold all those parts of life together. The parts that are difficult, the losses and painful parts, the parts that are joyful, the opposites that we inhabit individually and collectively, we can hold it all together. Our little stories, yours and mine, connected to the big story. White tells these elementary school teachers that teaching is the ability to cultivate imagination, poetic imagination, where we have the ability to see the ultimate context for our lives, where we have a sense of how it all fits together. In our biblical tradition, we have a section of the Hebrew Bible of our Old Testament called the Wisdom Writings. Some of these are poems, some are histories, some are secular writings, there's even love poetry. And the book of Proverbs, where our first reading today is from, it's part of this wisdom literature. And Proverbs is really a collection itself, 7 different parts written down over maybe a span of 300 years, borrowing from other wisdom literature in the ancient Near East, some of it paralleling Egyptian writings in particular. Parts of this book, Proverbs, are the oldest surviving writings from the Hebrew wisdom tradition. And this wisdom tradition, it's kind of a synthesis of everything that came before it. That's how one author describes it. It's the law of the Torah, and it's the critique of the prophets, all filtered through people's experience of life, filtered through lived human experience. And it doesn't come out as a list of things we should do or not do. And it's not a list of things to believe in our minds. But today it's wisdom personified as a woman calling to you and to me. Lay aside immaturity and live, she says in our reading this morning, and walk in the way of insight. And Jesus stands in this tradition too, tying our small stories to the big arc of God's story of creation and redemption. Teacher, that's what his followers call him more than anything else. And he teaches them with questions, doesn't he? With stories that make them wonder and think and imagine. And he teaches them with analogies. He says that he's the bread, the vine, the shepherd, the farmer. And he calls them out of the smallness of their lives. And then he pushes them to the very edge of what they know. And he says to them, look out even farther and trust in taking the next step. You know, this imagination that White speaks about, it often takes us to the frontier of our own experience and knowledge. It's brilliant, he writes, for a child to sense in an adult that the adult is on the frontier of their own unknown, and that they are there in an incredibly joyful way. They're not diminished because they don't have all the answers. They're actually looking to some horizon that is giving them a grand vista. And this is what the best teachers do too, White says. It's a desire in the teacher that the students can feel in a palpable way. That's how he puts it. When you get to that edge, when you look out at that grand vista, that is when your story is connected to the big story that runs through all of creation, the largest context for our lives. And it's in those moments that we hear a call, White says, often one that we didn't choose. We hear vows made on our behalf. That's how he says it. Vows that are calling us forward with faith and trust in the next steps for us. It's the bread that lasts, Jesus says. Looking out on the biggest vista joyfully on the edge of the unknown with courage to take the next step. As we start this school year together, I am so grateful for the teachers who gave me a glimpse of that biggest vista. I'm so grateful for the rabbi teacher who we follow here, who takes us to the frontier of the unknown for us, and who says, trust me, follow me into the biggest story. And I'm so glad to be on the edge of that frontier with you today, looking out joyfully at that place where all the different parts of life come together, where you and I are connected together, where we know each other, and where we know God. Trusting in the vows that we hear, the vows made on our behalf. Amen.